What's up guys, Social Ham here. So, first video, official video, since I've been back. And we're going to be talking about the infrastructure bill. So for those of you who don't know, the infrastructure bill is something that is kind of tense right now in Congress. There's also a deadline for the government to decide whether or not they're going to raise the debt ceiling, which if they don't, the government will effectively shut down Friday. So there's a lot of stuff happening right now in Congress. Essentially, there are two different infrastructure bills, and we're going to be going over them, basically the main points of each one. There is the bipartisan $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill, and then there is the partisan Democratic $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill. The bipartisan one is actually supported by Republicans. I believe 19 Republicans voted on it. Sorry about that, my dog was crying. So, the bipartisan one was actually voted on by Republicans. It is bare bones, but I think it is a okay infrastructure bill. It's $1 trillion. Of that $1 trillion, only $550 million is new spending. The rest is just money that was already going to go to infrastructure. So we can go over that real quickly. Like I said, it's okay. It's nothing compared to the $3.5 trillion one, but I think this is a good bill nonetheless. So, key things in here, there's $110 billion that's going to roads and bridges, which essentially is repairing and funding transportation research at universities. There's also funding here for Puerto Rico's highway and congestion relief in American cities. Essentially, trying to find ways, maybe we can expand the highways in really congested cities like Dallas, Miami, California being a really bad one. $66 billion for railroads. There's nothing here about high-speed railroads, which I think is kind of crappy. I feel like we should start innovating and more and get high-speed railways like almost Europe and Japan has. There are $65 billion for broadband, including funding to expand broadband in rural areas and local-income communities, and then $14 billion that would help to reduce internet bills for low-income citizens. So I think that's also another really good thing that people could be doing. That's really the main things that are in this one. The rest is kind of standard stuff, money for ports, money for the environment, airports, safety. Nothing super crazy. I think the other thing to note here is there's also $7.5 billion each for electric vehicle charging stations, so to have more electrical charging stations across the highways of the US, and also electrical school buses for rural communities. Now, the $3.5 trillion one, which is being called the Human Infrastructure Bill by some on the left, has a lot more. So you have $342 billion for the Banking Committee, which includes public housing, housing trust fund, and housing affordability and equity and community land trust, essentially giving out cheaper loans, making affordable housing in low-income areas, stuff like that. There's $198 billion for the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, which is just trying to find ways to develop clean energy. $1.8 trillion for the Finance Committee, which this is where the stuff comes from. You are going to have less taxes to pay if you make less than 400K. If you make over 400K a year, then you will be getting a tax increase, which I think is fine. Lowering the price of prescription drugs, and then making the corporate pay rate, I believe, higher on the taxes. Then I think the biggest thing here is $726 billion for health, labor, education, and pensions. This is where the universal pre-K for 3 and 4-year-olds comes in, and this is where the free community college comes in. Something else that I actually didn't know about was also there's been an expansion to the Pell Grant for higher education, because I believe as of right now, you can't actually use your Pell Grant to get a doctorate or master's degree. So now that would also expand to that. So now if you happen to not make that much money, or if you're a good student, now you also get a Pell Grant to get a master's or a doctorate. And there's other stuff here that's honestly really good, like $18 billion for the Veterans Affairs Committee. There's also the $25 billion for small businesses, $20.5 billion for the Indian Affairs Committee, which is just dealing with Native Americans. There's a lot of good stuff in here, but no Republicans want to vote on it, and some Democrats don't want to vote on it. So what's the problem here? So the biggest issue right now is that Pelosi is having the vote for the $1.2 trillion on Thursday. Now, Pelosi had previously said that she was not going to have a vote and she was not going to pass the $1.2 trillion bipartisan bill if the $3.5 trillion isn't guaranteed to pass, which I think is an awful political move. There is so much partisan divide in this country right now, and for good reason. Republican senators and politicians don't really care that much, but at least Republican people do want things. Your average Republican voter is not some evil, malevolent, awful person. The politicians may be, but not the actual voters themselves. And I think that saying you're going to hold hostage to $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill, even though it's okay, there's not as many good stuff in it as the $3.5 trillion, that's just hurting you, because it's just an easy way for Republicans to point at the Democrats and be like, hey, we want to give you better roads, we want to give you better buildings, but Democrats don't want it. I think this is an awful strategy, and even some progressives such as AOC and the Squad have said that if they know they won't be able to pass the $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill in the Senate, that they will strike down the bipartisan bill in the House because it already passed in the Senate. I think this is awful. I think this is really crappy. I think it's crummy. I think Pelosi shouldn't have ever spoken. She should have simply just said, hey, we have a bipartisan thing. We have some Republicans that want to work with us. This is good. Let's sign this bill. Let's get this bill through the House. Let's get it through Congress. Let's get it on Biden's desk. Sign it. And then if you want to get your $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill, or maybe do a $2.3 trillion infrastructure bill that adds on to that afterwards for reconciliation, do that. Because that way, at least you can be like, hey, we already gave you guys a really good infrastructure bill. You guys are getting better roads, you're getting better highways, you're getting, electrical charging ports throughout the country. How about we give you a tax cut and we make companies pay more and we do better things so you have free community college? And now, since no Republican wants to vote on that, you can be like, oh, well, we passed the other thing. They worked with us, but now they don't want to work with us, so blame the Republicans for not getting this bill. It's easy politics. I think the way they're handling right now is honestly really shitty. I don't think they know what they're doing. Hopefully, we'll see Thursday if they just pass 1.2 trillion. I'm really hoping they do, because if not, then nobody wins. The American people lose and the Democrats lose. But most importantly, the American people lose, which matters. So that's about it in that infrastructure bill. That's all I really want to say. Yeah, have a good one. See ya.